So gents, we are back with another Landlord Page podcast, and this week we've got a special guest actually, someone that people might have seen on social media, Chris Foster, who's the founder of a business called Sponge.
Being a landlord and a tenant, and I saw this as an agent, is the relationship between the two. If at the beginning it's just a transaction, you're going to always make it harder for yourself down the line.
He's got a brand ambassador, I should say, Mrs. Hinch. So anyone might have seen some of the reshares and retweets and reposts that she's done. But he's also a landlord and he's got lettings agency experience. So I'm looking forward to having a conversation with him. Mike, what type of questions have you got in store for Chris?
Yeah, Chris's business has grown from a side hustle into a big business selling into 1,000 shops in the UK. And as you said, backed by Mrs. Hinch has meant that he's got a 6-figure social media following for selling sponges, which confuses me as a non-cleaner. But it's an amazing situation that he's in. So when you have a business that's successful, where do you put your money? How do you do that? And why is he putting it into property is the big question.
And Tristan, what about yourself?
For me, it's Chris has got many years' experience as a manager and director in property. Why he got out of property and why he's using an agent to manage his property is important. I'd like to know more information on that as well.
Let's get Chris in and let's talk about his story really.
Chris, thanks very much for joining us. It's great to have you on our podcast this week. As we said on the intro, the owner of Sponge and also a landlord, become a landlord on the back of his business success. So, with a lettings background, quit lettings, gone into running your own business and then become a landlord. Tell us why.
Well, becoming a landlord was accidental. We needed a bigger house and we thought it'd be better to retain it than sell it. And so, we decided to let it out. Obviously used avocado to do that.
Have you always been someone that's thought about accumulating properties? Obviously your business probably takes most of your time, but have you always been, I'm going to start to build a bit of a property empire, or it just made sense at that time to just keep hold of the asset?
I always wanted to have a property empire, but now in the market as it is, whether or not I'd do that now, I'm not sure. But that was the plan originally. And
do you think that's probably come from your lettings background, your kind of previous industry experience as an agent? It's often people that are in the property industry always want to be in property, I find. So
100%. 100%. You meet so many successful people in life that have properties that rent out, HMOs or rooms or whatever, or standard properties. And as a young, I can't remember how old I was, it must be 19-year-old, joining property, that's what you want it to be. Especially when they turn up in the flash cars and everything like that. So definitely.
That's good stuff. It's good stuff. We'll get into property.
Okay.
But first of all, we've got to obviously talk about Sponge. We've got to talk about your business, how it's erupted. For me, obviously, following social channels and being very involved in social media, I see you all the time on Instagram and a bit on TikTok as well. So let's just talk about that, because it's a business which over the last couple of years has just gone bang overnight almost. So why did you start Sponge, and quickly, how did it sort of erupt into the business that it is now?
Yeah, I mean, it was accidental. But I was looking to defrost my freezer, and I was looking for a solution that could basically mop up a lot of water. You could take it to the sink because you trail it everywhere, it's messy. You use towels, but then you've got to dry the towels. And so essentially I was just trying to solve that problem. The only way I could do that is by creating 1,000 of these sponges. I couldn't find anyone that would do one for me. So I did 1,000, I branded them because I thought, why not? Stuck them on eBay, on eBay at the time, and they didn't sell. So I had to wait 6 months, and then I thought, I'm going to pack this in. This is just stupid. So I started an Instagram, and I basically just reached out to people on the hashtag cleaning, and I said, listen, I've got these sponges, and if you're interested, you can have them for free. And I gave away probably 200, 300 of them, and then it all started snowballing from there. And it was kind of the free value, and people were finding it and spreading it on socials, and then coming back to me and buying them. So
brilliant.
It was quite crazy, and it was completely unexpected. But
so although this podcast is for property investors, and bear with us listeners, we are going down track of that, but we've got to talk about it because it's become a known brand and it's in so many different shops. But just in a quick summary, so people don't think we're just talking about random sponges, the big difference between the 50p 4-pack that you're going to get in Sainsbury's to yours is?
Yeah, no, great question. So The original product is massively super absorbent. So it's made of a polymer rubber, and you can absorb up to 300 millilitres, which is essentially a can of Coke, in one sponge. And then once you pick it up, it doesn't drip at all. So it's incredibly powerful if you have something like kids or they're always spilling stuff everywhere. You can just one swipe, pick it up, take it to the sink, squeeze it out. It's pretty good. And then we found along the course it did other things. So it did damp dusting. So if you had it wet, you could wipe it along a surface and the dust actually ripped to it, as opposed to just a normal duster where it flew up in the air. So it was multi-purpose, and then from that point on we started developing a whole range of clean products.
Probably quite a good product, thinking about where we are with limescale issues. It's for actually landlords to leave in properties for tenants, because if it's that absorbent and that good, then there's so much limescale issues around here for end of tenancy cleaners. It becomes a real issue, and if a tenant's been in there for 3 years, they're not getting that all off. But actually, if they could just wipe it down from scratch, it would probably make a hell of a big difference. So, where did the business erupt? What was the kind of key factor in the eruption of the business and the marketing?
Okay, so we stumbled across social media and using influencers, which is essentially when I was giving my product out to people and they were recording it, sharing it. And we had some growth there. But when we hit about 10,000 followers, I met Sophie Hinchcliffe, who only had 4,000 followers at the time. And we did a giveaway with her. Obviously, she's Mrs. Hinch now, 4 million followers or 5 million followers, however she's got. But we became friends and we were chatting behind the scenes, and then she hit 1 million followers. She had this incredible growth that's never been seen before, like on Instagram. Literally hundreds of thousands of followers a day. Unbelievable. And because we'd become friends with her at that very small stage, we always stayed in contact. Then when she got to 1 million followers, I said to her, can I send you a package? And obviously she was like, yeah, of course you can, Chris. And then we sent it to her. From a shout out from her, we went from 10,000 followers to 50,000 followers, and it grew and grew and grew. And she's been a massive ambassador for the brand. And she still is actually, not so much because she's got her other things going on, but you will see a sponge product in her hand still.
That's brilliant.
And we replicated that formula and used Mrs. Hinch, and then used Charlotte Greedy, and used Lindsay Queen of Clean. And anyone that has an audience, we just try and get our products in front of.
Yeah, brilliant. No, it's the way to market a new product, I think, in this day and age.
100%.
So coming back into property then, what was your experience as a lettings agent, and what were the goods and the bads of being a lettings agent?
So I started 15 years ago, and when that was the case, it was a case of typing up a manual contract, like looking at a bank statement or pay slip, typing up a manual contract, giving the keys. Once you got the money, it was so simple. And I think after 15 years, we had the input of, like, say, EPCs and gas certs and all of these things that came in place. Towards the end of my career, I was finding that the paperwork to get a tenant in was just unbelievable. And the fees that were being applied, and that we couldn't charge the tenant anymore, it had to go to the landlord. And for me, I was just like, this is too much for change. So I thought I would leave the industry, as it were. But good things and bad things. I mean, the one thing about it is I absolutely love seeing people happy in a house. So like, that's the last transaction when you give them the keys and they're off, and there's no better feeling, I don't think.
Yeah.
The bad, I mean, lettings is lettings. I mean, where do you start? I mean, the non-payers, the people that trash the house if you're unlucky to get that. The angry landlords. It can go on and on. I mean, you're dealing with humans. It's one of those real difficult jobs that if you're not a people person, you can't manage people. You shouldn't be in it.
Yeah, I agree.
And I think you see that all the time, like young kids come in and being estate agents, but don't last very long, because if you're not forceful enough, if you can't handle situations or people around, you haven't got a chance, no chance.
It's an intense industry.
100%.
And you raise a good point, actually, because we've spoken about how things have changed for landlords and tenants over the last couple of decades, but actually we've never really discussed the impact it's had on the actual industry that we operate in. Everyone will go, let's leave the violins at home for estate agents, but it has impacted it, and it does also give reason behind why then the experience sometimes is what it is for tenants and landlords in agency. But I could see you nodding away there, Mike.
Yeah, I was harking back with some rose-tinted glasses to the one-page reservation agreements.
Yeah.
The money taken in cash, and the keys being handed over, and that being pretty much your admin. Being,
bank drops
being
at the
done.
end of the day.
Exactly.
Walking down the road.
Walking down the road with a rucksack with the cash in it. It's a very, very different, very, very regulated place now. Where
I will say though, it did need the regulation. It 100% is a better place for it, but I wasn't the person that enjoyed doing that kind of the back end paperwork and stuff. I loved the front end sales, the dealing with the landlords, the interaction there. When it became, I was sitting at a desk looking at paperwork, trying to make sure that the EPC is right and it's got the right level and the gas cert runs out. It got too much. I thought, I'm not enjoying this anymore. So for me, it was better to get out. And obviously my business took off, and that was new and fun and shiny and exciting. So it made obvious to go.
It's the ultimate side hustle, isn't it? That can take over your profession.
Yeah, it's perfect. Perfect example of doing it. When you talk to your accountant, when you decided to become a landlord since you've launched your business, did you have any different kind of eye-opening conversations with them that you thought actually from being a business owner and a landlord, there's anything that can go hand in hand that surprised you? Was there any different conversations to how you maybe just viewed it from a lettings agent to a landlord transaction? Is there anything that kind of flagged up and you thought, actually, there's something in this, is worthwhile in this? Was there any of those sort of combos you had?
You're assuming I've spoken to my accountant.
I hope so.
I mean, to be honest with you, I haven't, because do you know what? It was a case of I got married, and then we looked for a house, and the progression was, okay, well, let's either sell it or let the property, and we decided, okay, we'll let it, and it just happened so fast. Like, we offered on a house in November, and we moved in January. Like, literally, I was thinking, oh, no problem, we'll just tick along here, we've got loads of time. And then they were calling me up in, like, December, okay, yeah, pay your deposit over. Holy hell, that's quick.
Who's that solicitor?
They might have to have a solicitor on the next podcast.
There's a few conversations to have with them, I think.
6 weeks,
yes,
wasn't it?
literally 6 weeks. It was unbelievably fast. So those kind of things I didn't talk to the accountant about. And you're right, I think business owners have two different relationships with their accountant. They either work hand in hand or they work against each other.
Yeah.
And I know that sounds really bizarre, but it can happen. And I don't want to say too much, but obviously I've had both. And working at the moment with someone that's going to certainly be the former, working together. And things like that will, as you said, will come to light, really.
We often talk about having a really good, powerful power team that you trust, and having an accountant that works with you. And that doesn't mean avoidance, this, that and the other. It just means an accountant that can see the goal you're trying to get to and help you get there, rather than just seeing the now and going, well, that's what you need to do for now. Actually having an accountant that's got a bit of future-proofing for your business and for your self-assessment, etc., is, I think, really, really important. And it's definitely something that I completely agree with you. I talk to loads of business owners, and we've had business owners on here, and they always feel they're at heads with their accountant. It's not the way to be. So, yeah, I completely understand that point.
I think I was very short-sighted in the fact I thought I only need a VAT return. I only need someone to balance my quarterly books. I only need that. I'll do the rest. I can manage the stocking code. I can do all of that. And obviously, I'd never done product selling before. How was I supposed to know? But then I suppose I didn't know also that an accountant's a key player in helping me with those things. So I think it's a bit of education on anyone that's listening, I guess, that actually when you're looking for an accountant or someone to go out and help you with that, that's don't try and cut costs on that. Seriously, it's actually really, really important, because you just end up in a problem later on.
We had a recent podcast with a wealth manager or a financial advisor, not from a mortgage perspective, but from a money perspective. And same conversation within that. People, you're not paying for someone to transact something or do something for you at that point. You're not paying for someone to put money into an ISA or into a share pot. You're not paying an accountant for advice in that meeting. You're paying an accountant for the advice that they've accumulated over many, many years. And it's the same thing with us. You know, we've been in the job collectively for about 50 years between us. So when a landlord comes to us, they're not paying for us to find them a tenant. They're paying for the advice that we've accumulated, the experiences we've accumulated over the last 50 years. And that's where the value sits. And that's why we always say on this podcast, advice is so important. So yeah, totally agree. What's the kind of future plans for you in more property? Do you feel that your business hopefully will keep going from strength to strength, and you will add and you'll bring that dream of kind of building a bit of a property empire back, or maybe not an empire, but some sort of portfolio? Would you like to buy an extra buy-to-let in a couple of years' time, do you think?
Yeah, absolutely. I think pensions as they are at the moment, you can't be relied upon. So having a fixed asset would be best for us. We've got the house now, so if we can make, and it's a relatively smaller house, if we can make the jump to a bigger one and retain that one, then perfect.
Yeah.
And do it that way, as opposed to having the house and then buying lots of little flats elsewhere. I think actually progressively and slowly would be the plan for us more than anything.
But you've had a great win on your flat, because what did you pay for it?
154, I think.
And it's worth nearly 300 roughly, or 280, I would say. Achieves 1150 in rent. So in terms of price return, it's great. It's doubled in value, or under doubled in value in how long have that? 9 years, 8 years?
No, 7 years.
So 7 years, it's nearly doubled in value.
Yeah, we do say that the property market typically doubles every 10 years is the normal sort of theme. So, but I think what you're talking about, that kind of step ladder approach to growing a portfolio, is probably quite common actually. We see quite a few landlords that do that.
Probably some of the best advice I was ever given as a throwaway comment was, if you can get through your career or your working career having never sold a property, you'll be a very wealthy person.
Yeah, absolutely.
Because everybody upsizes. Everyone goes from a 1 or a 2 bed house or flat into a 3 bed, ideally into the 4 bedroom family home for the long term. And if you can get to the end of that journey at the age of 60, never having sold a house, you will be far wealthier than your next door neighbour who does the normal selling up the chain.
Yeah. I mean, as estate agents, we all know the landlord that's just rich because he didn't sell the first one.
Yeah.
And the first one just happened to be in Battersea, which was a dive 20 years ago, but now actually sells for £700,000, and he bought it for £30,000 or whatever. And everyone knows those stories.
Well, we see around here. I mean, I've been to see people in 4-bed detached houses that have got properties which were built in the 70s, and you know, they're worth close to sort of high sixes now. And they paid like 12 grand for it. You think,
absolutely.
You know, wow, I'd love to just buy that street back then. But obviously money is relevant, but that's the beauty of property. And I think we mentioned it on that wealth advisor conversation with Matt Jones, actually, because I think you raised the point, Mike. It's when you put money into something, or when you've got a business that's a spreadsheet, effectively, that's the visual of a business. The one thing that people have with security, with investing in properties, you can visually see it, you can drive past it, and you can check it's still there, and you know it's going to do X, Y, and Z. So that's where the confidence comes from. But I think it's a really sensible way of kind of building that portfolio up. Touching back on your business, obviously you've had great success in 4 years, which is brilliant. What's the 10-year plan? What's the next 6 years sort of look like for you? Are you thinking of going into different areas, different avenues, or are you going to stick in that lane and keep kind of growing it out?
No, I think everything's on the table, actually. We are in the cleaning area at the moment. We started with one type of product, which was super absorbent, and we've expanded into, say, microfiber cloths and like cellulose sponges and little accessories for the sink and things, but all in the cleaning domain. I would really like to see us go into, say, bathroom or beauty and maybe flannels and toweling and just spread across different sections. I mean, we're not there yet, and it takes massive cash flow to be able to sell but also expand. So yeah, definitely that's on the cards.
I mean, knowing your product and then knowing other products within the industry, if a landlord was to leave a maintenance or a cleaning pack for a tenant, for example, as like a move-in present, with maybe some sweets and some sparkling wine or something like that. But if they were to leave a specific cleaning pack, what items would you have on that list that you would advise a landlord to have, knowing the industry that you kind of work in?
It's a very good question. I would say microfiber cloth is absolutely. I would say some kind of stain remover probably, some kind of like general top spray, and then obviously a super absorbent sponge. You've got to get that in there just for, as you say, the limescale issues.
Mm-hmm.
And probably that's it. You don't really need that many cleaning products to begin with, but that would be a good foundation. You've got all the bases covered there, essentially.
Yeah, and what would you expect that to cost a landlord?
Oh, under a tenner.
So it's crazy, isn't it? Really, when
Yeah.
you think about it.
Yeah, it's not. It's not.
Yeah.
And you buy in bulk, it's even less. And yeah, and do you know what? I'm going, and this may be your point, but actually, it secures relationship with the tenant as well to have that little gift there. Because actually, Tristan said to me, which I found was quite interesting. My wife, for our tenant, went and got a daffodil pot plant and some cards and some chocolates or something, which I thought was fairly standard, but just said no one does that.
Mm.
And I thought that's crazy. That's absolutely insane, because being a landlord and a tenant, and I saw this as an agent, is the relationship between the two. If at the beginning it's just a transaction, you're going to always make it harder for yourself down the line. Like if, say for example, I need a bit of post at the moment,
Mm-hmm.
it's much easier for me to approach that tenant and ask for that post than it would be if I'd have just said, oh, there's the key, you're now my tenant, give me my rent.
I couldn't agree more. I think it's, you become a person. The perception of a landlord, quite frankly, is probably a fat old man driving a Bentley.
Yeah.
You know, the sort of evil looking guy who is just there to take your money out of your bank account. And if you humanise yourself and you build some credit with that person, that's going to come back to you in spades. And it doesn't cost much to, like you say,
No.
a bottle of wine and some chocolates, 10 quid.
Yeah.
Tops.
Mm-hmm.
And a card just saying, welcome to your new home is just a small personal gesture which goes a long way.
I'll tell you a story actually. When we moved into our house, the current owners had left a card and some chocolates and whatever, but they'd also left all their favourite takeaways in the area. And my wife, I don't know if she'll kill me for this, she actually cried. She thought that was such a nice gesture to say, like, I hope you're happy. No one cooks on the first night or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
Here are some of my favourite takeaways. The Chinese, don't, and probably was saying, don't go to the other ones. This is the best pizza one. This, just that tiny thing
Mm-hmm.
made my wife cry, because she just felt like, oh, do you know what? We've connected with the people before, and they loved the house. They want us to love the house.
Yeah.
And that's massive. Like
We had a conversation with Vez, who used to own end tenancy cleaning company,
Mhm.
and he was actually talking about the problems with end tenancy cleaning and how it's an industry which is really hard to actually make work. But that was one thing that he mentioned, because he's a landlord of ours as well, is that was something where he connected with his tenant, was explaining which were the best restaurants and a couple of things in the property that you should be aware of, because not everything works as you expect it to work. Some things are a little bit twicky, or there's a little knack to the window, or whatever it may be.
Yep.
And I find whenever you stay in Airbnb or even a kind of boutique hotel, that's just standard. It's one of the first things you do.
100%.
You check the cleanliness of the bathroom, tick, I'm not going to complain to reception.
Yep.
Throw the bag on the bed, and then you open the drawers and see what the hell's in the room. And then it's like, oh, there's a pack, and I just start looking at a pack. So
Start eating the free shortbread.
And how excited do you get when there's a selection of teas and
100%.
coffees and stuff like that, and it's a bottled water? I mean, it's the tiniest bit, but the hotels have realised that actually if we spend 50p here, we get back a lot more in terms of, we get a review, we get someone recommending, we get that picture on Instagram,
Mhm.
which is just so powerful for businesses. And I know that that's business, but this is a business as well, but also it's the relationship between the two. It just makes it so much easier.
Yeah.
And we should be doing this as humans anyway, no?
we should be, and we mentioned, you could split the landlord industry into three, and you would kind of have the people that we've just spoke about there, and that connection that people have, which is fantastic. And then just raw agency landlords that just use lettings agents, and it's just completely cold from anything else. And then you've got your kind of your private rental sector. Some are fantastic. You can split that into two. Some are fantastic, and some is rogue. And that's the sort of dimension of the industry that we work in. But if there was more like we're talking about there, and I think we actually experience a lot more of that ourselves, because we leave the tenant a little present, and you know, we've got a local kind of boutique sweet shop that we go to and get a nice sort of pack of pick and mix and nice avocado keyring and things. Just make them feel like it's a celebration, isn't it? It's that day of like the first day in your new home, whether it's a rental property or it's a sales property and you bought it. It should be exciting to open that front door. It should be really exciting.
Absolutely. And in fact, going back to my first agency days, they said, you know, when you're picking up the phone, you're telling people about property, it's probably the worst bit of the whole job. And when someone calls in, you're sitting there doing it as a job, you're like, hello, avocado, I'm sure you don't do this property, how can I help, or whatever. My old boss used to be like, that's the most exciting call that person's going to make today, because you have the property that they want to see. So when you pick up the phone, you should be excited for them because they're about to see their dream home.
Yeah.
And again, relationship. And you start off on that, do you know what, it's Chris here from Avocado. I love to see that. I love that house because it's got a south-facing garden, blah, blah, blah. Anyway, one's going to stop talking, let's go and see it. Like straight away, you've bonded.
Yeah.
And it makes the whole journey easy.
Yeah, energy and passion, I think it does get lost in the agency industry. So I've got one question. Are you going to go on Dragon's Den? Do you need to go on Dragon's Den? I don't know, but...
Yes, I do need to go on Dragon's Den. I think it's the answer. It's the honest answer. They have the connections and can open more doors than I can do. I mean, it just shortens that learning curve, doesn't it?
Yeah.
I can do it for 10 years and get there in the end, or not. But they can just pick up the phone and go, hey, owner of Tesco's, you need to be stocking this. So it's that. Someone did send me an application the other day, which was really bizarre. So you asked that.
I think because it's current at the moment, because I think Stephen Bartlett, you talk about social, but Stephen Bartlett has brought that social connection to it, because it was a bit oldie-woldy Dragon's Den. But I've started watching it now, because it's interesting, because he's looking at it from, is that Instagrammable is always the thing that he would look at, and obviously your product clearly is, because that's why it's grown on Instagram. But yeah, I just asked that kind of question out of tongue in cheek more than anything, but it's something you considered. So
yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think, and again, I've learned this when I was before in business. It was like, you do your business, you do it on your own, and you grow it on your own. And you know what? You can only go so far. I learned very, very early on that actually the more people that you connect with and you say, let's do a joint venture here, let's connect here, the doors open and the path to success becomes a lot shorter. So there's no, I would have no qualms getting with someone and saying, okay, let's do it together. And yeah, certainly the people in Dragon's Den would be able to help with that. There's other people that could do that as well. Definitely.
For sure, yeah. Which shops have you managed to get the product into? You know, how do those conversations go? Which stores and which things are you into at the moment?
Yeah, so we started with the Yorkshire Trading Company, which is obviously in Yorkshire, and they've got about 32 stores. They were the first store to take us, and I had to drive up there in my suit, and I was so nervous. And so I was like, this is my products. But now it's progressed. I do have someone that works for me who's like a sales agent, and he does the heavy lifting because that's the industry that he's in. But we're in the Range. The Range is a big stockist with us, and they reorder all the time. B&M is probably the largest cleaning store that we're in. And then we do quite a few wholesalers, QD stores, semi-chem, different stores. Yeah, there's quite a few now. And yeah, always adding to that portfolio, really.
Oh, brilliant.
But the hard thing is actually not getting it into a store. The hard thing is getting it twice into a store, which I never quite realised. Getting in there the first time is difficult, but not the final game. The final game is actually reselling to them over and over again. And you really want to become something that you see on the shelves all the time, like toilet paper, like Andrex or Heinz or whatever. Like, you go to Tesco's, you know that's going to be there. Like, there's no question. That's where you want to be.
Yeah.
And for obviously going back to business point of view, you can look at your cash flow and go, well, I know I'm going to get that from that all the time, and then that's perfect.
Love that. Well, I think, from this conversation itself, there's definitely something in landlords supplying tenants with some sort of pack. So maybe that's something we talk about off camera and see what can be created, because for the sake of 10 or 15 quid, it seems like a no-brainer for landlords, which would be really good, and it's a nice place for them to start, because it's going to protect their asset at the end of the day.
100%.
So yeah, I
100%.
appreciate that. So I'm going to pass over to Tristan. He loves the last three questions. We used to call them Quickfire. They're not Quickfire anymore, so we just call them the bullet points at the end, really. And over to you.
If you try to keep it short, but basically answer with your personal opinion.
Okay.
So the first question is, what happens next in the property market?
Oh, God, my days. Well, I'm not in the property market, so
That's what we like to catch people off
discard,
guard.
discard whatever I say completely. Yeah, I think it seems to me at the moment, it seems stable. It seems like there's a lot of demand out there. Everybody I'm hearing from, especially in the rental markets, they can't find something, or it's moving too fast. So at the moment, I guess the prices are going to increase. Whether or not that stops, I don't know. I wish you hadn't asked me that question. I have no idea, basically.
It's good to know, as someone who is a landlord, a former estate agent, a successful business owner, doesn't know the answer to that question.
No.
And that's why we do what we do, because actually sort of admitting that, I haven't got a clue, is a really good thing for us, because we try to put as much content out there to give people as much information as we can. We don't have a crystal ball, so we can't 100% predict it, but with a bit of education and experience, we can try and get it right. I think we got it right the last 2 years so far, so we'll see how we get on this year.
And in all honesty, that's exactly what I do when I'm looking for advice from anybody. I go to the people that are in that industry. So I would go to you guys as the estate agent and say, okay, what's happening? Do I need to sell it? Do I need to keep it? Blah, blah, blah. So yeah, but hopefully my tenancy is done, it's secure,
It's locked in.
and my assets okay. So.
If you invest in the perfect buy-to-let property, what does that look like to you?
Well, buy it cheap and get a good yield out of it, really.
Would you stay local to where you are now, or would you go afield? What's your view on that?
I've always been told to only buy where you know. So I probably transact somewhere where I know the market, I know the type of people that are there. I can give some advice to how to do local things or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
I think if you go too far out, you lose that. It just becomes a property transaction, and you lose that kind of intimacy of knowing what you're talking about.
Yeah, I think that's sensible. I think we say to a lot of people that are inexperienced in property investing, stick to where you know is normally a safer bet, I would say.
And if you're cash rich and time poor because you're running your own business, then it takes a lot of hours to go and research a property which is 100 miles from your house, let alone going to see it, to try and buy it. It takes a lot of time to figure out what the area's like, what the people are like, what the demand's like, what the demand will be like in 5 to 10 years, what the progression of the area is like. You don't know that. If you've lived or worked in an area for 10 years, you know that. It's in your head. It's just ingrained in you. You know everything about it, and you can make a decision snap off the bat, no problem at all. So that's why people stay local.
I think you'd have to be pretty wealthy just to buy somewhere and not have any clue about what the area. I mean, it's a big purchase buying. It's not something you should do. It's not like buying a microphone or a cup of tea. You need to put research in it. If you don't know, then you shouldn't really be transacting there.
Yeah,
I think.
And finally, what's the best single piece of advice you can offer a landlord?
Treat the property or give the property to the tenant as you'd want to receive it yourself. In personal experience, literally last month, I mean, I had to spend £2,000 just to get the property, not in a livable condition, but certificate-wise and everything. And although that hurt, I thought, actually, no, that's right, because now I feel safe. I know that the property looks good, and I can walk away from that comfortable, knowing that tenant's safe and secure there. If I'd have left it, I think there would have been something in the back of you can't, but there would have been something in the back of my mind thinking, that wasn't right. So yeah, leave a property or give a property as you'd want to receive it, really.
And the last question from me is the name. It's spelt differently to how you'd expect to spell sponge. What's the story behind that? Where did that quirky name come from?
So that was my wife. I asked her to think of a name, and she didn't come up with one for all day. And then finally she sent me a message because she was out somewhere, and she'd put H2O in the middle of sponge, as in the sponge, water going into the sponge, and literally that was it. And that was after weeks and months of me trying to think of a name. She came up with it in 2.4 seconds, purely because I was just bugging her.
It's funny how many businesses come up with something that's almost there, go all the way around,
Yeah.
and then come back to it and go, actually, it just needed that little tweak. And I
Yeah.
think we've done that on numerous things with websites and branding and all sorts. So it doesn't surprise me that it was something as simple as that. Thank you so much for joining us on podcast. It's great to hear about your business, great to hear about your property experience as well. So really appreciate your time.
No, thank you for having me.
Gents, I'm sure you'll agree, a really interesting chat with a chap who's done incredibly well from a business in 4 years, from taking time off his lettings director role to put sponges in envelopes, to having factories and contacts all over the world in what he did. Tristan, what's your biggest takeaway?
Couple of things for me. One is his key piece of advice: invest where you know, and that's come up a few times in our podcast. And secondly, the reason he got out of agency was because of all the legislation and paperwork involved. He didn't want the headache of it, and that was the main reason he left, on top of his business obviously blowing up. But for those, it was definitely that for me.
Yeah, and I think that's the takeaway that we can help landlords with, is the legislation. It's the power of having a managing agent and not doing it privately. You are up to date with it all. I actually just really enjoyed the story of how he grew his business. And although we said flippantly there it's 4 years old, 2 years of that we've had obviously the COVID. So to actually grow that business through the power of social media, it just shows how, from a generational point of view, businesses are changing in the way that they blow up. So really, really, really interesting. And his idea of how he wants to grow his portfolio by keeping hold of his family homes and growing them, not in a fast and really aggressive way, but just in a practical way that works for him. It makes a lot of sense. So it was a really good conversation.
Guys, until next week, it's another one in the bag.
I'm flicking through YouTube and through Spotify. I don't think there's a podcast or a video channel on YouTube that landlords could land on where they're not being sold something.
I mean, it'd be the first time any estate agents ever asked that question, but why not ask that question to a wider audience?
Estate agents have the knowledge there, but they don't seem to share it.
You can do different episodes based around someone that wants an exit plan or someone that's just starting their portfolio.
The rules change every year.
Yeah.
But why not just open the floor out and just say, well, is property even the best investment out there?
And tax advice is a big thing, especially with everything that's changed, capital gains tax, and obviously your stamp duty costs that you need to pay and whatnot. People don't realise what they need to prepare for.
We build a podcast and we build a YouTube channel, somewhere that landlords can go and they feel they're not being sold to, but they're just getting quality advice.